And so he come around on the south and was doing like donuts over my yard and my house and myself, and all of a sudden there's a mist.
We're back on the record on case number 21-1038, Odum versus Frey. All parties, counsel, and court personnel are present in the courtroom, as is the jury. Counsel stipulate to the correct seating of the jury.
So stipulated.
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Busby, you may call your next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. The plaintiff calls Glen Miller. First,
Yes. Mr. Miller, if you'll please come here to the witness stand. If you'd face the clerk and raise your right arm to take the oath of the witness.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give in this matter, now pending before the court, shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God, or under the pains and penalties of perjury?
Please be seated. Mr. Miller, right in front of you is a microphone. You can move that closer and it'll make it a little easier for everyone to hear you.
good afternoon, Mr. Miller. Pleasure to see you again. Thank you for coming.
Yes.
The first thing I want to do is just ask you some questions about your qualifications. What do you do for a living, sir?
Can we get his name and just the spelling? That's okay.
Could you state your name for the record and spell it?
Glen C. Miller, GLENNCMILLER.
And, Mr. Miller, can you explain to the jury what it is you do for work?
I'm retired now, second time 30 weeks ago. Since 1978, I was a faculty member at the University of Nevada, and taught courses in environmental chemistry, pesticide chemistry, published a lot in the fate of environmental chemicals in the environment, taught a class on how to measure chemicals in the environment. Have a strong background in agriculture, but I've been retired now for a month since I was chairman of the department and returned. Being a chairman is not the best job in the world, but a former colleague of mine went back and was chairman for 16 months in the College of Agriculture at the University of Nevada.
Okay. Mr. Miller, would you mind speaking a little bit? We're having a hard time hearing you back here.
Yes.
Okay, thank
Okay,
you.
good.
Yeah, the mic helps. All right, can you give the jury an idea of your educational background?
Yes, I had an undergraduate degree at the University of California, Santa Barbara, and a PhD at the University of California, Davis in agricultural chemistry. And I spent a year at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency laboratory as a research scientist in 1977, and then I started teaching at the University of Nevada, Reno in 1978.
Okay. And you've been retained by Ms. Odum as an expert witness,
Yes.
is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. What is it you've been asked to render an opinion on?
I've been asked to look at some of the chemistry associated with the chemicals that are used in this pesticide application, and to determine whether in fact the chemicals were detected, for one thing, and then secondly, something around the fate of these chemicals once they were applied.
Okay. Do you do any work outside of your career in academia?
I've done some consulting work.
Okay.
I worked for a pesticide company, Sumitomo, U.S. associated company in Bay Area. As Valent USA, what it was called, and I was head of a group that was looking at the environmental fate of chemicals that were produced, identified by Sumitomo, and then looking for registrations of those chemicals in the U.S.
Okay. Do you have any specific experience with chlorpyrifos?
Chlorpyrifos.
Okay.
Yes, I do. We a variety of things. We looked at a lot of different pesticides. In fact, I spent a lot of my research time on pesticides, and one of the articles we published about 15 years ago was looking at gas phase flow chemistry of pesticides, meaning once they're applied and how do they interact in the air. They're fairly non-volatile chemicals, and we developed a method for heating up the chamber so we can look at if they did get up in the air, how long would they last, just normal sunlight conditions.
Okay. So relative to other chemists, how much experience do you have with this particular pesticide?
Well, there's a lot of people who've done more than I have, but I would say that I came to understand this chemical. We had this chemical and diazine and another organophosphorus insecticide. We spent a fair amount of time looking at the environmental chemistry of these compounds, so I'm quite aware of how they are degraded in the environment and how to measure them, for example.
Okay. And can you describe what you did to come to your conclusions in this case?
Well, mostly, I read the reports that were produced by the Department of Agriculture and Resco Laboratories. And I looked in some of the background information on chlorpyrifos and how long you'd expect it to remain in the environment, and made just both of what I knew about the chemical as well as looking at some of the specific characteristics of the chemicals, vapor pressure, solubility, those sorts of things.
Did you also look at reports from the chemistry lab at the Department of Agriculture?
Yes, yes.
All right. Your Honor, at this time I'd move pursuant to NRS 5275 that Mr. Miller be permitted to testify as an expert.
And which counsel is going to be Mr. Leath?
Your Honor, we'll reserve for our cross-examination.
And did you have any objection to being identified as an expert?
Yes, Your Honor. And so if it's okay, we'll reserve and bring to light some of our concerns during cross-examination.
Your Honor,
Go ahead.
in my experience, if there's questions about qualifications, voir dire is appropriate. I don't hear an objection to the motion, so I request that it be granted.
Then, Your Honor, I would go ahead and request that opportunity of voir dire at this point.
Sure. So just to make sure, we apply the Hallmark standard, and we look at least 4 distinct prongs: formal schooling and academic degrees, licensure, employment experience, practical experience, and specialized training. I'll give you a chance to voir dire right now before I qualify him or don't qualify him as an expert.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
I'll be brief. Good afternoon, Dr. Miller. We had a chance to meet when I took your deposition a couple months ago, remember? You've never testified before as an expert witness in a trial involving claims of pesticide drift, correct?
I was deposed extensively on a pesticide drift case, but it never, they settled out of court before that. But I haven't testified exactly on that I can think of.
Right, when I took your deposition, didn't you say that this was the first time you've ever even given a deposition on a claim involving pesticide drift?
Objection, Your Honor. The deposition's witness has been a representation of his countenance.
I'll let him answer if he recalls.
Yeah, I cannot remember. This was probably 15 or 20 years ago. It had to do with a case where an application was put on a herbicide, put it onto a burn area in Idaho. And that, in this case, it was dust that moved off the site. And caused some tremendous damage to sugar beets and soybeans, as I recall. And the chemical in that case lasted for a long time, and it was an odd pesticide dissipation case in that the chemical degraded half of it very quickly and then just stopped degrading. And that dust flew over on the soybean sugarcane fields and caused some major damage, with many millions of dollars of damage that occurred. And I don't know how it turned out, quite honestly, but it was taken very seriously by both the Bureau of Land Management, who was being sued, along with DuPont Chemical. And that was before the split came, and so it had to have been 15 years ago. I don't remember the exact dates, but I was deposed then.
Okay. And Dr. Miller, I'm asking you about the answers to your deposition questions from 2 months ago.
I apologize if I've misstated that, but that one, anyway.
So when I asked you, how many depositions involved a claim of pesticide drift or pesticide exposure, and your answer was, I think this is the only one, actually. And I asked you, this current one? And your answer was, this current one. You were mistaken?
I was mistaken.
And Your Honor, I'm going to go ahead and lodge an objection. This isn't relevant to the board hearing inquiry.
I'm going to give you just a little bit more leeway on the board diary.
Okay, and then let me just ask you this then, Dr. Miller. This is the first time you've ever given any trial testimony, though, as an expert witness on a claim involving pesticide drift, correct?
That I believe is true.
Your Honor, we would move that this witness lacks qualifications based on that lack of experience.
The court's going to find that he is qualified as an expert. I base that on his work experience that he set forth in his testimony, his educational background, and find that he is qualified in the area, in this area. He has not testified before as an expert in court, but if that were a disqualifying factor, nobody could ever be an expert.
I understand.
It is, I mean, you'll be free to cross-examine him on, that, but these are complicated issues. I think it will help, his specialized knowledge will assist the trier of fact to understand the evidence better, and under Hallmark, his testimony will be limited to matters within the scope of his or his specialized knowledge.
Thank you, Your Honor.
But if you want to put anything on the record with respect to the court's ruling, I'll let you do that now.
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
Mr. Busby?
Thank you. Right. Mr. Miller, can you state in everyday plain language for the jury what it is we asked you to examine in this case?
Well, I just might mention that in the 1990s, I was a co-owner of an environmental laboratory that did this kind of work. So
I'm sorry?
I was a co-owner of a laboratory in Reno that did this work from 1990 to 1999.
Oh, okay.
We didn't do chlorpyrifos exactly. We did do a lot of environmental analytical work with larger labs at that time in northern Nevada.
Okay, so you have experience actually testing
Yes.
this chemical or chemicals like it?
Yes.
Okay, great. Can you describe for the jury just what it is we asked you to look at and do?
Well, there was a suggestion that pesticide, there was a pesticide drift, and trying to ascertain where the source of that drift is not an easy task. But I looked at the chemistry that was found on the samples, both by the state of Nevada laboratory. It has an EPA designation. It's a good laboratory. I know the people there. And then another lab at Resco, I believe it's in California somewhere, that measured the concentrations of chlorpyrifos that were found, and both of them detected. These were low levels. They were both detected, and they were found using liquid chromatography mass spectrometry, which is maybe not something all of you have been acquainted with, but it is a very sensitive and specific method for determining pesticides and other environmental chemicals. One of the questions that came up is that there were two chemicals that were applied that day by airplane that Ms. Odum was concerned about, and there was only one that was detected. And I looked at that issues, and I had background in that, and I knew that these chemicals, these called pyrethroids, are not very, they're harder to detect, and they have a detection limit that's 50 times higher, meaning it's much less sensitive to LCMS methods than chlorpyrifos. And so the point was made that there was two chemicals applied, only one was detected. therefore it couldn't be from this plane that was applying both chemicals. And looking at that, the detection limits for chlorpyrifos, they found that chemical in both laboratories. They didn't find the other pyrethroid insecticide. And you look at it and you say, well, the chlorpyrifos was close to the detection limits, and they would have to have 50 times more of the other chemical in order for it to be detected. And it wasn't detected, but it was a straight analytical issue because of the way these liquid chromatographs, mass spectrometers work. They have varying detection limits, and they could detect chlorpyrifos, they could not detect the pyrethroid. And so the argument that was made that two chemicals were used, only one was detected, meaning it couldn't have been from that plane. It's just a straight analytical chemistry issue. That's exactly what you would expect to see. You would not expect to see the pyrethroid. You would expect if chlorpyrifos was applied, you would expect to see that, and that's what we saw.
Your Honor, I have an objection. May we approach?
Of course.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Busby.
Hi, Mr. Miller. So I just wanted you to take a look at what's been marked as Exhibit 61. It should pop up on the screen there. This has been admitted into evidence. Do you recall reviewing this document as part of your report?
Yes,
Do you recognize this is the report of Mr. Dennis Lum?
yes.
Okay. And does this report contain the conclusion that you were asked to assess based on your knowledge and experience?
Yes.
And do you agree with the conclusion that Mr. Lum drew in his report
No.
for the reasons you've already explained to the jury?
Right. You would be able to detect chlorpyrifos, not detect the pyrethroid.
Objection, Your Honor.
So are you, I only want one attorney,
Just this one time, please. Could we at least have some foundation on which of the three incidents of the tests he's talking about? There were three different tests testified to by Mr. Lum yesterday. I don't know which one he's talking about.
and that's a fair objection, but I do want to identify who's going to handle it so we just,
Mr. Leath, and I'm sorry, Your Honor, I was overly enthusiastic.
okay, that's fair. And so Mr. Busby, I'm going to sustain that objection.
Mr. Miller, we were talking about Exhibit 61, which has been admitted, right?
Yes.
Okay, do you recall which alleged spraying incident this report involved?
It involved the spraying of the pyrethroid chemical and real phosphate, pyrifos. Pyrethroid chemical was cyclomethylene.
Did we ask you to render a report on any other spraying incident other than this one?
This is the only one that I saw.
What was the date of that?
The date of the,
I guess, I mean, I want him to, because I think the way yesterday they referred to as three different incidences on dates, I just want to clarify what that is.
This was a report on October 14th based on a complaint that was received on August 11th, 2020. October 14th, 2020 was when the report was submitted, and it was August 31st, 2020 of when the complaint was filed by Ms. Odum.
Okay, so we're talking about the alleged incident that occurred on August 31st, 2020, right?
Right.
Okay. And just finally, Mr. Miller, did you state all of your opinions herein today to a reasonable degree of scientific probability?
Yes.
All right, nothing further, Your Honor. Thank you.
Mr. Lee?
Yes, Your Honor, thank you. Thank you. All right, good afternoon again, Dr. Miller. So, when you were retained as an expert witness by Ms. Odum in this case, you were asked to look at only one of the alleged incidents, and that's the one that is alleged to have occurred on August 31st of 2020, correct?
I was retained previously to look at a contamination from the herbicide, glyphosate.
Your Honor?
But that was not,
Hold on, I think, hold on, so what's the,
We just spent a couple minutes trying to clarify that, what his role is now. Your Honor, may we approach?
yes. So the court's going to order that just the short answer that Mr. Miller just gave will be stricken from the record. I'll allow, and I'll direct the jury to disregard that testimony and direct counsel to focus questions and Mr. Miller to focus answers on his retention for this case on the incident that he testified in direct examination. I think it was August 31, 2022 or 20.
August 31, 2020.
August 31, 2020.
Thank you, Your Honor.
I will do
And thank you, Dr. Miller. Now, you, as part of the work with respect to that incident, you reviewed Vance Lum's report. We just showed you Exhibit 61, correct? And you did you ever review any deposition transcripts?
No.
Did you ever talk with Ms. Odum herself?
Today's the first day I've met her.
Did you ever look at any of the other records in the file of this, such as the pleadings, discovery, production of documents, anything like that?
No.
So the only thing you looked at was Mr. Lum's report and the laboratory results?
Right.
Okay.
State laboratory and Andresco laboratory.
And during direct examination, you said that you agreed or disagreed with Mr. Lum's report.
I disagree with certain sections of it.
Okay. And did you look at the amount or the result of the tests that were done by the Nevada State Lab?
Yes.
Okay. And you're familiar with the results for the pepper foliage that was tested?
Yes.
Okay. And for the pepper foliage, the results came back at 0.009 for the chlorpyrifos and non-detect for the
That's correct.
pyrethroid, yes. And did you also look at the test results for the lilac foliage that was collected by Mr. Lum?
Yes.
And what were those results?
Those are non-detects.
For both chemicals, correct?
Yes.
And did you include those results at all in your analysis of this case or your opinions?
I really wasn't asked to evaluate those. They were non-detects.
Okay, but if they were non-detects from foliage that was taken near the pepper foliage at the same time by Mr. Lum, wouldn't that be important to your evaluation?
It would be, but I recognized that the concentration found in the peppers was quite low. And so if you do any environmental analytical work, you expect fairly wide ranges of detects, non-detects, different situations, different wind patterns, different everything, so it's not unexpected to find some non-detects. In this case, because the method used was very, very good, and it's a good lab, I'm acquainted with that lab, and they found a detection with liquid chromatography mass spectrometry, which is both quantitative and qualitatively very, very good. I commented that it appears that chlorpyrifos was detected on the pepper sample.
And in your opinion, how did the chlorpyrifos end up in the pepper sample?
Well, the other evidence that was part of that report is that Ms. Ms. Odum actually saw a plane fly, and there was an admission that it applied both chemicals, and it made it more reasonable than not, more likely than not, that it came from that spraying during that day, because the sample was taken the following day. And you would expect that to still be present. It wouldn't degrade, neither one of the chemicals would degrade that fast, but one chemical was detected, so it was pretty reasonable, more likely than not, in my opinion, that it came from that spray operation. It was within, I'm not sure what the distance, half a mile, something like that. I don't hold me to the exact, that plane was applied the chemical.
And you also read from the complaint by Ms. Odum that she claimed to have been directly sprayed herself by the plane, correct?
I believe that was in there. I didn't look at that particularly because it was not, it was, there was no data associated with that, other than her statement that she saw a plane.
And if her statement was that she was sprayed directly by the plane, these results are totally inconsistent with such an exposure, correct?
Probably, yeah, I would agree that it's not a direct application. But what a direct application is, and then wind blowing, chlorpyrifos is one of the organophosphates that has a tremendous odor associated with it. It's a sulfur type of odor. And the other chemical does not, by the way, but chlorpyrifos does. And so the indication that she smelled something, she saw something, I would question myself whether there was a direct application, because the concentrations were either, one analysis was non-detect and the other was detect with a high degree of certainty. Direct application, applying directly over property and spraying a full dose of it is very unlikely.
Very unlikely, because you would have expected, had she been sprayed, as she claimed in her complaint, the amount of chlorpyrifos and erythroid found in both the pepper foliage and the lilac foliage would have been extremely high. You would have, because it would have been it would have got a direct result.
It would have been higher, but the chemistry of these things is fairly impressive. You spray something down, it's supposed to go there, but there's always this drift issue of very small droplets that get in the wind and then are scattered around wherever the wind may go. So it's very likely that some of these drops came from some distance away. I can't guarantee that, but it is likely that spray drift came from the application in some way. But not direct, I'll grant you that.
Okay.
Not direct.
And so if her claim is that she was directly exposed to the spray, your opinion is that could not have happened.
Depends on how you define it. I mean, what is, if you smell something and you see a plane
I'm talking about a direct application.
I object, the witness needs to be allowed to answer.
Sure.
It is not, I would expect where the plane flew on the crop, that they would have much higher concentrations.
And you said that you believe that the chlorpyrifos found in the pepper was the result of drift.
Drift.
And what steps did you take as part of your work in this case to investigate whether or not drift could have occurred?
Drift is a very common problem in the pesticide industry. I mean, it is, there's all sorts of examples where drift has caused tremendous damage on crops that are, near a pesticide application, never directly applied the chemical to that application, but it drifted over. So that's not an uncommon problem at all, to see that. And there's a chemical called Vandal D that is it's a herbicide mixture that's commonly used for grain crops. And if that drifts over to a grape crop, it'll kill that grape crop or another susceptible crop. So it's spray drift is something everyone tries to minimize, but it does exist. And especially in those situations where you have something that is, or organophosphate that have tremendous odors, you get hit with that. You don't know where it came from, but it is there and it's pretty distinctive.
My question is, Doctor, what steps did you take for this case to investigate whether or not there was drift?
I really did nothing other than look at the data that the chemical was found on the property and a report that the plane was flying, 2 chemicals, and then I was asked to look at this issue. If you only find 1 chemical out of the 2, does that mean that it wasn't from that application? The answer to that is no.
So Doctor, your testimony here to this jury is that it's more likely than not the chlorpyrifos in the pepper sample was from drift, but yet you did nothing other than presume, because it was found in coincidentally an application a half mile away, it must be drift? Is that your conclusion?
Well, the conclusion I got was the fact it had to come from somewhere. And it was being applied at an area not too far away. And the vagaries of how the wind blows. I've done a lot of work looking at drift and pesticides. It's looking at just trying to stabilize them in a local area. They blow everywhere. I mean, it really is difficult to know, but the chemical had to come from somewhere.
Sure. But you can't say with any sort of certainty that it came from the application by my client.
No,
Because
I never said that. I said it's more likely than not.
Exactly. But you did nothing to test that theory. For example, Doctor, did you look at the wind conditions that were present at the time of the application?
Mr. Lum's report.
Okay.
It went from 0 to 5.6 miles per hour.
But never towards Miss Odum's property, correct?
What does 0 mean? I mean, if it was a calm day, you don't know which way the wind blows. And I've seen chemicals drift one way or the other. In the morning at the University of Nevada, the wind comes down very calmly. In the afternoon, it goes back up. It goes up first, then comes down. But it's a very small amount, but a half a mile an hour is a mile an hour is not, it's fairly quick. I don't know. I will admit that. I don't know.
Okay.
But on the other hand, it had to come from somewhere. It was detected with certainty, and that chemical was applied near the farm. That's why I say more likely than not proof, but much more likely than not that it came from that application.
And you did nothing to check to see what other farmers had sprayed chlorpyrifos in that same area during the same general time frame, correct?
I did not.
Okay. And did you do anything to learn about the method of application by my client? For example, the amount of water that was used in the tank mix, the amount of gallons per acre that were sprayed, the nozzles that were used, the droplet sizes that were used, the spray pressure that was used, the flight paths and swaths that my clients performed as part of this investigation or part of this processing. Did you do any of that?
I was not provided with that information.
Isn't that kind of important if you're trying to figure out whether or not there was a drift?
I was asked to look, is it reasonable to assume that if a chemical was applied near a property and there was an application chemical was detected. Made the assumption, I mean, it's, in order to really ascertain that, you have to have a full analytical scheme set up where chemicals, and I've done that before, have an analytical scheme where chemicals are placed and what kind of deposition you get. I did it with some work down in Silver Springs having to do with the odorant. We measured the concentration at various sites and it showed conclusively that there was drift that went everywhere, but mostly it was with the wind.
And so you did not look at any of the product labels involved in this application, correct?
I've looked at Barbarifos many times.
But not specific to this incident, correct?
No, I didn't.
Okay. And you you read Vance Lum's report and you saw that he determined that there were no violations and there was no enforcement action taken against my clients, correct?
Yes.
And if there had been drift, the Nevada Department of Ag is charged with enforcement of violations, correct?
Well, sure, if in this sense, this,
Hold on, what's the objection?
I'm asking for a legal conclusion. This is a chemist, not an attorney.
I can rephrase, Your Honor. Okay. When you looked at Vance Lum's investigation, you determined that he used good practices as part of his investigation, correct?
we certainly didn't know the facts. We made a statement on there that was factually correct. But largely, I agreed with Mr. Lum. I've not met him, they have good staff, State Department Bank, so with that, there's two things I did agree with. One, the chemical would have been there if both the pyrethroid, cypermethrin, and chlorpyrifos would have been there following the application if it was, these don't degrade, they both degrade kind of on the same order, they would have been there.
Right.
From the day before, so we can't say that someone said, well, it might have just dissipated. It would have been there. And second, there was no indication of what the tank mix was. Was it a one-to-one tank mix as far as concentration in weight per volume? I did look at that, but he didn't, Mr. Lum did not report that.
And you also agreed with, go ahead, finish, Dr.
The report, there, it was in the report that he had, there was no, as I recall, there was no indication that samples were taken of that mix. And I don't think there was a report of what the mix rate was.
And you also agreed with Mr. Lum that based on the amount of detectable chlorpyrifos in the one sample that was inconsistent with Ms. Odum's claims of being directly sprayed.
Your Honor, I object, this is getting repetitive. That question's been asked 3 times. Overrule.
You know, if you smell a chemical in the air, you get nervous about those sorts of things. I would say that based on the chemistry I know of these chemicals, if they had been a direct application, you would have found them at higher concentrations. So I'll mention that. But as far as the drift and having that odor and that feeling I'm getting sprayed on or I'm getting exposed to a chemical, that is something that I think is very reasonable. These really are not very good smelling chemicals.
When I took your deposition, do you remember saying that the chlorpyrifos is actually not very smelling?
No, the pyrethroid is not very smelly.
Doctor, do you remember saying chlorpyrifos itself is not terribly smelly?
But the formulations are.
So what does that mean?
That means when you mix it up, it's not absolutely pure because these sulfur-containing compounds in there. I don't know if you've ever used malathion, it's a common, fairly common household chemical. It is tremendous odor associated with probably one of the strongest ones, but there are components of the formulated mixture. They don't have pure PFAS in these mixtures. There's always some level of contamination of smaller molecules that frankly, you don't like to have associated with losing odor. Yeah, chlorpyrifos, it's an organophosphorus insecticide, which is a class of chemicals that are quite odoriferous. They are.
But just because you smell a chemical doesn't mean you've been drifted on by it.
How else would it get there?
It could just be an odor without being contacted with spray droplets, correct?
I suppose, well, it's still drift.
So let me ask you this then, Dr. Miller. As part of your investigation and the work on this, did you look to see whether or not my client used any sort of a drift mitigating agent in the tank mix?
No, but I would expect that pretty much everyone uses those as a standard operating procedure to minimize that.
Okay, and if they use one, does that make it less likely, in your experience, for there to have been drift?
It probably would have been less. The spray technology is very, very complicated as far as getting drops that fall to the ground quickly, minimizing the amount of very, very fine particles. And so I recognize that technology, but if there's an odor associated with it, very small droplets, you can smell them. It doesn't mean you have a high exposure, but if you can smell them, depending on what that formulation is all about, you can be exposed to those. Now, as most people, when they smell something, you wonder how big of a risk is that? Is it really a problematic risk, or is it just a bad odor? And I've done a fair amount of work on odors and how you regulate odors. There's an issue with just down the road here in Felon that had to do with oil recycling facilities, that people would smell these things and they were just terribly, terribly smelly. And they weren't toxic, but they were really smelly. And so the whole issue was, how do you regulate that issue? And it's very hard to regulate odors, but if you detect them, you know there's something in the air, but you don't know what risk it really is. And that's, I think part of the issue here is I don't think Ms. Odum, you can ask her at some point whether she ever had mass spectrometer training and how to run these things and figure out exactly how much of what was in that air she was smelling. But the fact that it was on the one sample means it probably came from somewhere.
Sure, came from somewhere, but the lilac sample had neither, so what does that mean?
Again, we talked about this before, the vagaries of how chemicals are deposited on leaves are going to depend on what kind of exposure they have and what kind of leaf material it has on that surface. A highly waxy layer is going to pick up more than something I grow peppers at home, and peppers have a very significant particular layer, a waxy layer. Perhaps, although I don't know, I don't have to admit I don't know what the lilac has, but this was a low detection, as you well know. And just the variability, 2 samples doesn't make an argument. If they had nothing on them, then maybe you would say that there's really no basis. But one of them had a detection that was a very unambiguous detection. And that had to come from somewhere. And I won't guarantee where it came from, but the most logical explanation is it came from the application.
Thank you, doctor. I have nothing else.
Yes, just a few questions on the paper. All right, Mr. Miller, you mentioned that only 2 samples were taken in response to a question from Mr. Leath. How many samples of an acre for Odum's property would you have to take to know the exact distribution of any spraying or drifting?
All I can say is the more the better. And if if you took 10 samples, for example, and found it in 3 of them, that would mean something. If you found it in all 10, that would mean something else. If you found it in just 1, that would mean something else. I mean, it really does depend on what kind of equipment you're using to sample for the chemicals, and what kind of laboratory you have to work with them. But two samples taken and 1 shows a positive, based on the method that was used. It's a pretty good indication that that chemical came from somewhere.
Okay, and, I mean, does 1 out of 2 samples, does that give you any indication at all about the distribution or how much of the stuff was on the property?
None, really.
None. Okay. And I'd just like you to comment on the chemical we're talking about.
Yeah, it's chlorpyrifos is one of the most widely used chemicals in years past. It's an organophosphorus. It's a Dow product, and I knew some of the Dow chemists were developing it. But it was part of the organophosphates, all of which are effectively all of them are now being banned because of neurological toxicity to children, particularly neurological, developmental, and cognitive problems, this was like 3 years ago, or 2.5 years ago, this was used. In the meantime, it has been banned by the EPA, as have most of the organophosphates, simply because of toxicity-related issues. They're mostly that short-term insecticidal toxicity, which is also toxic to humans, but not as much. But then that long-term toxicity, that repeated exposure to these chemicals causes sufficient neurological, cognitive, developmental problems that they were banned.
Okay. Nothing further. Thank you, Mr. Miller.
Just briefly, Dr. Miller, chlorpyrifos hasn't been banned for all uses, just on food products, right? You can still find it in your ant baits, you can still find it for insect control around the house, you can still use it on timber, you can still use it on railroad ties, you can still use it on telephone poles, correct?
The registration to all these chemicals is based on the risk assessment. And that risk assessment is particularly focused on what foods people eat. And there's other applications that have, people are, it's a real science. It's risk assessment of dealing, how much are people going to get of these chemicals? There's classic chemicals, for example. You have this risk cup, and if you have too many type of exposures to this, the risk cup overflows, and then it becomes problematic. And so that's what they've done with this. If you have a treatment of non-human interacting materials, it doesn't put it on food crops or crops that are transferred from an animal into humans, then it becomes more of a problem. And that's the risk assessment. You can question me all you want about risk cups and risk assessment. That is a science in itself.
Sure.
And I'm not prepared to deal with that. But I do know, when I was working for Valent USA, that we had to look at what kinds of exposures people would have, and they were trying to minimize the amount of exposures that people would have, particularly children would have, to the chemical time.
One moment, Ron. That's all, Your Honor. Thank you.
Anything based on that?
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Mr. Miller, thank you.
You're tough, by the way.
Thank you, Doctor.
Your Honor, leave Mr. Raycoff here. I need to check on that.
Oh.
Okay. I'm sorry, Your Honor, maybe we take a brief wrap.
Sure. It seems like Mr. Miller was. Ladies and gentlemen, of the jury, we're going to take a 10-minute recess. During this recess, it is your duty not to converse among yourselves with anyone else on any subject connected with the trial. Do not communicate with anyone in any way regarding the case or its merits, either by phone, email, text, internet, or other means. Do not read, watch, or listen to any news or media accounts or commentary about the case. Do not do any research, such as consulting dictionaries, using the internet, or using reference materials. Do not make any investigation, test a theory of the case, recreate any aspect of the case, or in any other way investigate or learn about the case on your own. Additionally, it is your duty not to form or express an opinion on any subject connected with the case until those findings submitted to you. It's 2:46, let's come back at 3 o'clock. We'll be in recess.
All rise. Please be seated.
Come back on the record on case number 21-1038. Odum v. Frey. Parties, counsel, all court personnel, and the jury are present. And the court will counsel stipulate to the correct seating of the jury.
So stipulated, Your Honor.
Yes.
Mr. Busby, your next witness.
Thank you. Going to call Plaintiff Salisha.
So, would you please come to the witness stand? You face the clerk and raise your right arm to take the oath of a witness.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give in this matter, now pending before the court, shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God, or under the pains and penalties of perjury?
Please be seated. Go ahead, Mr. President.
All right, Ms. Odum, I've forgotten this for every witness, so I'm remembering it for you. Could you please state and spell your name for the record?
My name is Salisha Neva Odum. It's spelled SALISHA-NEVA-ODUM.
Okay. Ms. Odum, where do you live?
I live at 5862 McPherson Lane in Fallon.
Okay. And how long have you lived there?
Oh, it'll be 20 years in October.
Okay. And what do you do for a living?
Well, I am a farmer right now. I am an organic farmer, actually.
Okay. Do you have are you a certified organic farmer?
Not at this time. I have a producer's license. I have not recertified because of the acts that have been going on my farm, and it's a lot of paperwork and a lot of money that I feel like is going to be ruined anytime I try to do it.
Okay. So I'd like you to take a look at what's been marked as Exhibit 25, what's been admitted into the record. I'm going to pull it up for you. Do you recognize this document?
I do. That's my past certification from CCOF for organics.
What is CCOF?
It's the certifying agent out of California who is certifying, to be organic.
Okay. And when was this issued?
That was issued in 2019.
Okay. And when did it expire?
It expired at the end of 2022.
All right. Can you tell the jury just briefly about your business, where you sold your crops, etc.?
Yeah, mainly the past in 2020 and 2021, I was selling my crops at the Fallon Food Hub and also at the Village Farmers Market in Reno.
Okay. And can you describe for the jury what kind of stuff you grow and sell?
Oh, I grow all kinds of stuff. I grow all kinds of greens, root crops. I grow summer stuff, squashes, melons, literally everything I possibly can because I want to grow everything because I like to eat it also. So.
Okay. So I'd like you to take a look at what's been marked as Exhibit 27. And this has been admitted as well via stipulation.
Yeah, that's my producer's license that was issued last year in 2021.
Okay. So you maintain a producer's license?
Yes.
Okay. And can you describe what this document shows for the jury?
Well, it just basically shows different crops that I've been growing and a certain amount. I'm actually growing a lot less than I have in the past just because it's a lot of hard work to get ruined, so.
Okay. But just Exhibit 27 looks like, geez, what's the number there? There's quite a few things that you were growing there, right?
Yes.
Peppers, orca, eggplant, tomato, cucumber, melon, squash, basil, potato.
Yes, I grow all that, and that's okra.
Okay. You can tell I was the chef in my family. Or the farmer. All right. So, Ms. Odum, year on year since, and you said you've been farming since 2003 about?
Well, I've been organically growing food on that property since 2003. I've actually got first certification within 2009.
Okay. And so it seems like you think there's a difference between organic and certification, is that right?
And the certificate, you mean the
Yeah.
certificate? Well, yeah, there is, because, you know, with organics, you're bound to certain rules that, you know, that explain to people what you're doing with your crops rather than just pretty much anything, because a producer's certificate doesn't tell anybody that what you're doing with your crops. And so that has a lot to do with it.
Okay. So do you use any pesticides or insecticides or herbicides when you grow your crops?
No,
Okay, why?
because I don't feel like you need to, and to me, it's a poison, and I don't want to put poison on my food.
So,
And my customers don't want poison on their food either, because I speak to customers straight to them, like at the farmer's market. This is not the store where they just come in and buy whatever. They actually speak to me, they want to know what's on the food, and so when I tell them, they believe me,
when you tell them what?
that I don't put any sprays on the food at all.
All right. So let's talk about the issues in this case, okay?
Okay.
Okay. You've heard some testimony from Mr. Lum about an August 31st, 2020 incident.
Yes,
Do you recall that incident?
yes.
Okay. Can you tell the jury what happened?
Well, I can tell you, it was in the morning, and I had picked a bunch of chard, and I brought it in to the shed and put it in the refrigerator, and I went back out. You have to weigh it, because I was supposed to be picking 100 pounds. And so I had gotten a little short, you know, of that, so I went back out to pick the rest of it. And at that point, a spray plane came from the east and flew directly over my property long ways from east to west. And at that time, I was out in the field, and I saw the number on the plane, which I wrote down, and I called, and I actually looked up on the internet, because I'm not gonna sit here and try to assume what's going on in life. So I wanted to look it up, and it said that it was a plane owned by Jerry Frey, and Frey Spray. So, but, you know, this was a little bit later.
Okay, so what time of day was it when you were
You
picking?
know, it was after 7 in the morning, between 7 and 8. I'm not exactly sure the exact time of that. But then at that moment, you know, I was like, okay, whatever. And so, you know, what the heck's going on? And so then all of a sudden the plane come back. There it come again, and I believe it went from, at that point, it came from the south over to the north, flew by. And then I'm like, what the heck's going on? So I didn't have my phone, I didn't have no camera on me, so I go in the house to get my camera to see, you know, because I'm like, you know, if he comes back, I'm gonna get him on the camera. And so at that point, he came, I think I even actually at that point, I called the police, because I'm like, this guy's, you know, crazy, what's going on? And so the police came, and then I didn't see that plane for a little bit, and then, well, the cops were like, okay, we'll go check it out, we know who it is. And so I go, okay, and they left, and then all of a sudden the plane comes back, and he comes over from the west, circles around my property about the side, at the middle of the property, because it's long ways, it's a long property running from east to west, and it's shorter from north to south. And so he come around on the south and was doing like donuts over my yard and my house and myself, and all of a sudden there's a mist. I'm not saying it's a full-on, you know, bunch of liquid coming down, but it's a mist. I can smell it, I can feel it, my eyes are burning, my skin is burning, and it happened a couple times over, and so I go back in the house, you know, I'm like, what the heck, and I told kids, don't come outside. My daughter was actually getting in process of trying to get on the computer to get with her teacher, because it's the first day of school, and she
Okay.
goes to the Oasis Academy.
So,
Yes.
just a sec, so you have children who live with you at your house?
I do, yes.
How old are your children?
They are 15 and 16.
Okay, what are their names?
Zimri Baker, and he's my youngest. He's got Down syndrome. He's a handicapped child. And then my daughter, Sarah Baker, she's actually goes to the Oasis Academy. She's getting her degree this next year. So.
All right, so backing up for just a moment, can you tell the jury why you got into farming?
Actually, because I don't, I've never been good around chemicals or anything like that, and I always want to grow my own food. I just like it, okay? And it's fun, I have a really good time doing it. It's like what has made me happy in life. And so, yeah, and I want good food. I don't want to just have some food that somebody sprayed some chemicals on and then just go eat it because I actually care. And so, yeah, I decided to get into farming because I have some friends who are farmers. And so they actually told me about, because I had my son with Down syndrome and I was working at the Churchill County Junior High in the kitchen for 8 years, but when I had my son, I decided I wanted to stay home with him because he needed more care. And so at that point, I was not working, and some friends of mine says, hey, you gotta go to Latin Farms, we know you know how to grow stuff, you need to become, do this, because they want people in there to grow food for their CSA. So I said, okay, I'll go to the meeting, I'll check it out, because they also wanted people who weren't gonna be spraying chemicals, they wanted good food, they didn't want GMOs, they wanted no pesticides or herbicides, and so I said, okay, I'll go up there and check it out. Well, ended up, I actually became a farmer and I started growing a lot of stuff for the Latin Farm CSA, which I did for quite a few years, like 3 years. And then, that CSA started changing and different things were going on with it. So I ended up just kind of doing my own CSA for private customers. And then I also started selling at the farmer's market. I was doing a little bit for his CSA, and I also grew for a lot of other CSAs at that time, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Let's fast forward again.
Yes.
Okay. So it's August 31st, 2020.
Yeah.
You go back into the house. What do you do next?
Well, I got the camera because, the plane went away again, but then it came back again. And at that time, it was like going around and it was circling over my house. And and one thing I did fail to mention is that the very first time I saw that plane, when it came from east to west, I literally saw that plane dive down and then it went up over my house, just like that, just kind of like a dive bomb. And I'm like, what is going on? It was freaking me out. And so, anyway, so I got in the house, I got the camera, and I'm like, the mist is going and it's kind of making me where I can't think real straight and things like that. And so I'm sitting here trying to take a picture, and my daughter's like, because I won't let her go outside. I made her stay behind me. I come out the back door there, and here comes the plane straight at me. And I'm thinking, is this guy gonna hit me? I literally thought that plane was gonna come at me and hit me. And then about second time, third time, and I was like, I ain't going out there no more. But I got a video that last time it come over, and the video come around, and then all of a sudden, my daughter's like, I'll get the video, and so she went over to the side window because he kind of went over towards the side this time, which that video was taken right over my side yard.
So,
Your Honor, objection, move to strike, there's a narrative, not in response to any question.
So I'm going to sustain the objection. I'm not going to order it stricken, but what I'm going to ask you to do is listen to the question and just make sure you're answering the question. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
it's okay, so I know you're nervous, we'll just slow down, okay?
Okay.
All right, so you took a video, right?
Yes.
Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and present to the witness portion of Exhibit 11. It's been identified as, the file name is August 31st, VID 202-00831-057220.
I'm here.
Of course.
So. And so, is that the video you took?
That's actually the video that my daughter took out the window.
All right, if I may, I'd like to show the witness August 31st, VID 2020-0831-075403.
Which exhibit is that?
That's exhibit 11.
Still.
Your Honor, okay.
That's the video I took.
Your Honor, I'd like to move that file be admitted as evidence, and I'd like your permission to present it to the jury.
please?
Is that video number 2 in exhibit 2?
Yes, it's identified BID 2020-0831-05740.
So I want to make sure I understand. Both videos are marked as Exhibit 11.
Yes, Your Honor, there's a folder marked as Exhibit 11.
Okay.
The original electronic files were provided to the defense counsel, and that's how we filed them in the case.
So you showed her both videos in that folder in
Correct.
Exhibit 11. And you're moving for admission of both videos?
Just the second one, she.
Just the second?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
And I'd be glad to ask that that be marked next in order, if that's convenient for the court.
So why don't we mark, there's only 2 files in Exhibit 11?
There are photos and videos. This is just one of the photos.
Okay. And so you're proposing that, what is the last exhibit number we have?
It is,
It's currently 64.
64. What are you proposing that that we mark the second video as 65?
Yes, sir.
Moving for its admission. Let's go just, just from a management standpoint, do you have the ability to do that?
I can do whatever Your Honor would like.
How do we have it?
I have it marked
Is
as,
it on a DVD or?
it's on a DVD. I have Exhibit 11 marked folder entitled August 31st, 2020, photos and videos.
Okay, so for purposes of the motion for admission, will the second video, you know the name of that video? What?
If you can please
Yeah,
list the
They're kind of
title
long.
of the video again.
sure, Your Honor, it is August 31st, BID 2020-0831-075-403. And I apologize for doing it, but I wanted to maintain the data showing.
so that'll be, that file we mark as Exhibit 65. And you've moved to now admit Exhibit 65, is that
Yes,
right? Mr. Leath, just as to Exhibit 65?
I believe that if this witness took that video, then I have no objection.
So Exhibit 65 will be admitted.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'll go ahead and play that for the jury. All right, Ms. Odum, what can you see in the still in the video there?
Well, that's my porch right there, right outside the back door where I was standing and then the first place.
Okay, that place that is in your backyard?
Yes.
Okay. Do you think that plane flew over your property in that photo?
Objection, lack of foundation, speculation.
So I'm going to sustain the objection and allow you to ask more questions.
Okay. Can you estimate how far away the plane was from your property? Was it over your property?
Objection, leading, also lack of foundation.
So,
That plane was flying directly over my house, about 40 feet right above the tall trees that we have are the, like the poplar trees, and they're all, you know, you guys have seen them, they're all about that height, and it come right over the top.
Okay.
About that height.
All right.
I would say, you know, estimated 40 to 60 feet myself.
So you mentioned you smelled something.
Yes,
What did you smell?
I smelled a chemical smell. I'm not an expert on,
Was it similar to anything else you've ever smelled before?
not that I know of.
So when did this incident conclude? Do you remember?
I just remember that it actually happened over the course of about an hour.
Okay. All right. So what did you do after the incident?
Well, I, you know, got changed and got my clothes off and everything because I was the only one outside and, you know, went in and told the kids don't go out at all and things like that. And then I took a shower, of course, and, you know, reported it. I looked up the plane number, you know, reported to the NDA.
Okay, so you called the Department of Agriculture?
Yes.
Do you remember who you spoke to?
Well, I believe at that time I had called Brett Allen because I had his phone number already. And and he did not answer.
Okay.
And I left a message for him, and I believe he actually called me the next day.
You heard from Mr. Lum, you saw Mr. Lum testify yesterday.
Yes.
So Mr. Lum came to your house, correct?
Yes,
And that was a result of a complaint that you filed, is that right?
yes.
Can you describe what happened when Mr. Lum showed up on your property? It was the day after the incident, right?
I don't think it was the day after, honestly. I believe that Brett Allen was not answering the phone that day, and I think he said something about he was at a conference or something, so he didn't even call me till the next day,
Okay, but Mr. Lum came to your property,
the
right?
day after
Okay.
that, yes.
Okay. And can you describe your interaction with Mr. Lum when he arrived at your house?
You know, he came and I said, you know, what do you want to do? And I did ask him if he wanted the samples of the clothes, and he said no, they were only taking vegetable samples.
Objection, hearsay.
Okay.
Sustained.
Move to strike.
And that last answer is stricken, as hearsay, and the jury will be ordered to disregard what was referred to as Mr. Lum's answer to the question.
Did you offer to provide Mr. Lum with clothing?
Yes.
You were wearing? Okay. Mr. Lum took samples, correct?
Yes,
Okay. Do you know how many samples he took?
2.
Did you ask him to take more samples?
I don't recall.
Okay. Were you provided with any input onto where the samples were taken from?
I did. I just said, you know, maybe here and here, so.
Okay. And where was here and here?
Well, lilacs and the peppers, which they were about 15 feet apart from each other. The lilacs are actually near my backyard, and the peppers were farther out in the field.
So is this an accurate representation of your property?
Yes.
Okay. Can you describe for the jury where the samples were taken?
The samples were taken, well, how do I do that?
You can touch that thing in the
Okay, well, here's the lilac right here.
Your Honor, just one objection, or just point of clarification. Can we have a date of this Google image?
You know, the imagery rate date is 5/26/2014 / newer. I'm just using it as a demonstrative exhibit.
So I'm going to sustain the objection and allow you to lay more foundation about whether, you know, the standard questions.
Okay. So does this accurately depict your property?
Yes,
Okay, is this what it looks like during the growing season when you're growing food?
for the most part. I mean, I do change things around, but I mean, it's only such a big field, so, you know, there's only so much room on that field.
All right. Are you able to discern the various features of your property based on this?
Yes.
I guess, I mean, ask the next question, we'll see.
Okay. All right, Ms. Odum, where on your property do you recall Mr. Lum taking samples on?
Well, first of all, I can see that the lilac is right here, because it's a line of lilacs. And then the peppers would have been here.
Okay. All right.
Can we have that described by counsel, since this exhibit is kind of transitory?
So can you describe where you marked on whether it's central, whether it's in the middle of the rectangle?
And maybe I can make a suggestion, because I think it is fair that, I don't know that anyone can really nail to work down, you know, how they do it, but maybe use some of the things that don't change, like the house, the street, or the different roads, and give references, you know, which you described as markings.
All right. So can you describe how far back from the house the samples were taken?
I'm gonna say, you know, in regards to the house, the lilacs are probably 20, 25 feet.
Okay. And I want you to describe for the jury whether or not you saw any fluid coming out of the plane itself.
Objection, leading.
Overruled.
I saw a mist coming down. And so, you know, whether it's coming straight from that plane, I mean, the plane's doing this, so it's kind of hard to, you know, pinpoint that. And I'm, you know, pretty freaked out because when a complaint's up on top of you that close, I mean, it's not fun, I'll tell you that.
Okay. So, Mr. Lum took the samples and left your property, is that correct?
Yes.
What happened next?
Well, we were waiting for quite a long time, you know, to find out what a substance was that was sprayed or misted or whatever you want to call it. And so it had taken quite a long time, you know, and at that point, of course, I'm not going to eat this food. And the customers that I sell to, I'm not going to compromise their, you know, what they believe that I'm selling them at that point. So I have to wait and find out what's actually going on.
Okay, backing up for a second.
Yes,
So let's talk about the growing season.
yes.
Can you tell me when you start doing the work on your farm for the growing season?
Well, you know, I actually start working in January. I have to lay the fertilizer, which the only fertilizer I actually use is manure or homemade compost, which I make on my farm myself. And so, you know, and I do all that by hand. I'm literally shoveling, you know, for a while, and I get it laid out, and then, and because with the organic certification, you have to wait 90 to 120 days to be able to harvest from those crops before all the bacterias are dead in the soil, and that has to do with the organic certification. And so I have to do it very early to do that, but not only that, I'm the only one working on my farm, and so I'm doing all the work, so I have to space things out and get things going at certain times to get it ready, like, okay, so I actually even plant, like, say, my broccoli, cauliflower, cabbages, and a lot of the root crops, like the beets and the carrots, because they take such a long time to get going, and
Thank you, Ms. Oden.
Yes.
But when do you start doing planting?
planting, a lot of times I start in January or February.
Okay, and are you producing crops through the entire season?
Not really. I mean, I have in the past, but I pretty much just started, you know, because I have like a window of my sales that I have decided to do.
Okay, what's the window?
Well, like the farmer's market. Okay, there's 18 weeks at the farmer's market. It starts at the beginning of June and it ends at the end of September.
Okay.
And so I'm, you know, trying to get a lot of the stuff ready to be ready for that first market, and then I'll have a lot of other stuff following, you know, as it goes along.
Okay, do you make most of your money from the farmer's market?
Yes.
Okay. All right, were the crops you were had on your property on August 31st, 2020, were those intended for the farmer's market?
Most of them were, yes.
Okay. And so after this occurred, what did you do with the crops that were on your property?
Well, I didn't do anything with them because we didn't know what was sprayed there, and you know, I'm not going to compromise myself or my customers, because the reason that they buy from me is because they know I don't spray chemicals on their food.
So do you recall Mr. Lum discussing Exhibit 61, which I'll show you now, which has been admitted? Do you recognize this?
Yes.
Okay. And do you recall when you received this?
I believe it was, you know, at least a month after the spraying happened.
Do you see the date there, October 14th, 2020?
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall whether or not that was around the time period when you were provided with this report?
Yes.
Okay. So that's a good month and a half after the incident occurred?
Yes.
So what's going on at your farm during the month and a half until you received this report?
Well, you know, fact is, a lot of the melons are rotten because they're not being picked, and a lot of the greens are going up in the air and seeding, and you know, it's just kind of a waste of everything because I don't know what's on the stuff. I can't sell it yet. I don't really even want to go out there and touch the stuff because who knows, you know, what it's going to cause me.
Are you required to report anything to your certifier when you sprayed?
Yes, I did report to the certifier.
Okay, do you recall when you did that?
Oh, I believe, you know, in a couple days, I'm sure. So.
And do they, what's your impression of what you're supposed to do? Or are you provided with any direction from the certifier what you're supposed to do after spraying it to them?
Not necessarily. I do know that with organic certification, with direct spraying, you are not allowed to sell, a crop if you spray it. And so I'm going by that, but yet we still don't know what's been sprayed, the rate of anything, and so I can't really make any decisions on that until we get that information.
Okay. And this was pretty late in the season, right?
Yes.
Could you start growing stuff after you received this report in October of 2020?
Well, not really. I mean, I have a little hoop house, but you don't grow a lot much in there.
And not enough to make a living off of?
No.
Can you estimate, generally how much money you think you lost as a result of not being able to sell these crops at the farmer's market?
Well, I know there was like 5 more weeks at the farmer's market, and I'm sure I lost about $10,000 because I had a lot of stuff out there still that I was, could sell.
Okay. Can you just tell the jury how much money you make a year farming big property?
I don't make a lot. I mean, it just depends. I mean, I had actually just got back into farming because I had to take a couple years off for reasons. And so I was kind of getting back into it, and 2019, I did this amount, and then while I was gonna bump it up, I go, well, things went well, I got customers back, I'm getting back into it.
So things were ramping up. Is that
Yeah,
what you're saying?
exactly, so I go, well, we'll do more, and so I had actually done more. I think that year in 2019, I made around $25,000 gross, which is not a lot, but it's in a 5-month period. And, I'm picking that $25,000. It's actually a lot of produce, and probably could have even sold more, but, it gets to a point, well, then it freezes, so you've got to get it all going at that time and everything.
Okay. So when you received the report in Exhibit 61, what did you do?
I gave it to my certifier, and, it's really at the end of the season, so I just, kind of just said, well, we're gonna revamp and rethink and, go with next year.
Did you look into the kind of stuff that the report indicates Mr. Frey was spraying?
Oh, I surely did. I looked into that and I found out that it's a neurotoxin.
Okay, what did you look at?
I just looked at different sites on the internet, the EPA and other sites.
Okay. Do you have any specialized training in science or chemistry or anything like that?
No.
Okay. But what was your impression based on what you saw?
My impression that it was really bad stuff.
Objection, hearsay.
I'm asking for an impression.
Yeah, there was really bad stuff, and it was nothing that me or my family or my customers need to be around.
Would you eat the produce with that stuff on it?
No, I did not eat it.
Would you feed it to your family?
No,
Do you
did
think
not.
it would be fair to your customers to sell it to them with that?
Objection, leading.
Sorry.
Existing.
I'll rephrase. So, what do you think your customers' expectations are when they buy produce from you as to whether there's chemicals or not?
Objection, Your Honor. Foundation. It's also speculated.
I'll allow her to answer that question.
I can tell you that I talk to my customers. A lot of my customers, I feel like they're family and friends. I might not even know their name but I know their faces, and I've talked to them many times, and they've asked me the questions, and yeah, their expectations are the fact that I have told them I do not spray the produce. I will not spray the produce. I'm doing this because I care about people, and I don't want to feed them chemicals.
Okay. All right. So did you have any follow-up with anybody from the Department of Agriculture after you received this report?
I don't believe so. I can't really recall.
There was no call to explain the results or anything like that?
Oh, I don't believe so.
Could you recall how you received this?
In the mail, yes.
Okay.
I might be mistaken on that. I believe it was email.
Okay. Okay. All right. So, July 6, 2021.
Yes.
Can you describe for the jury what happened on that day?
Yeah, it was, the sun was just coming up. And so I'm standing there ready to get some work done, and I just happened to have my phone, and I was turning it on, and all of a sudden I hear, coming from the west, I hear a plane, and it's coming real fast and real low, and I'm like, what the heck? So I look back, and I'm like, my shed is here, and I'm on this side. And then all of a sudden I see it, and I run to the other side, and I catch that plane, and I'm running after the plane with my camera, and the spray just comes down over everything, over me, over everything. And then he went straight back to the airport, which would have been that way. But anyway.
Okay. So, what did you do after this incident?
Oh, the same thing, you know, I changed my clothes, took a shower, reported it. You know, my children were luckily asleep and not really even, you know, involved in that particular spraying.
Okay,
Went
so
out.
what time in the morning did this occur?
You know, I was somewhere between 6 and 7. I can't remember the exact time.
Okay, so, how do you know that it was that time?
Oh, because I remember, I just remember.
Okay, is that the time you're typically picking crops?
Yeah, you know, I get up early and, you know, sometimes it's 5, sometimes it's 6, just depends on.
Okay, why do you do that?
Well, because I'm the only one picking and I got a lot of stuff to pick, and especially like the greens and stuff, you gotta get it early while it's cold. You can't pick greens in the heat, so.
Okay. So, again, you called the Department of Agriculture.
Yes,
Did Mr. Lum visit your property again?
yes,
Okay. And, did Mr. Lum take samples?
yes.
Okay. What's your impression of what kind of samples he took this time?
I don't know, he just came in and said, this is what we gotta do. And I said, okay, you know. And I have no faith in them, so I was like, okay, whatever.
All right. So, when did you become aware of what was being sprayed that day?
You know, when they gave me the letter, the reports in it.
Okay, I'd like to have you look at what's been marked as Exhibit 60. Ms. Odum, do you recognize this document?
Yes.
Okay.
Clear the green.
Sorry.
Clear the green off the screen.
Clear the green. Oh,
The green.
yeah. There's green here too, so I was
Oh,
like,
I'm sorry.
see that. All right, so Ms. Odum, do you recognize this exhibit?
Yes,
Okay, and this is the report you eventually received from the Department of Agriculture, right?
yes.
And when is it dated?
Date August 3rd, 2021.
Okay, and how long after the incident was that?
Oh, that was, you know, like 4 weeks.
Okay, so what's going on with your farm on July 6th, 2021? Where are you in your cycle of producing food?
Well, I had just gotten doing a lot of the, you know, the final plantings, and so my second batch of melons was in, the first set was just, you know, about that big, growing real beautiful and nice. I had a next set, which hadn't really started producing yet, because I like to do a couple batches, because they only last for, you know, like 6 weeks or whatever as you're picking, and then you get the next batch, and that takes you through to the end. And, you know, just everything, the tomatoes were getting ready to, they're coming on, and, you know, just everything was beautiful out there that time.
Okay, but for your business,
Oh.
are you getting ready to pick crops to sell, or what's going on?
Oh, I had already been picking crops for, you know, quite a while at the farmer's market, but I think it was like the 5th or 6th week going on the farmer's market, and I had done some work for the food hub also.
Okay, so what was your response to the spraying incident in terms of whether or not you continued producing?
Well, I can tell you, you know, at that point, they said it was the glyphosate, and there was damage, and, you know, with glyphosate, and I'm not an expert, but this is easily looked up, is that for the first couple days, you know, you notice a little damage, and then over time, it gets worse, because it takes time for that particular chemical to work.
Okay,
Your Honor, I would move to strike as non-expert testifying.
Sustained.
okay. So Ms. Odom, what did you notice about your crops physically after the incident? If any?
Well, within like a day or two, you could just see holes, you could see rough spots on the greens, you could see like the lettuce had that curling brown around the edges. And I mean, within 2 weeks, it was like devastation. I mean, everything just got worse and worse and worse. I mean, my second batch of melons just went to, it all fried and died, it turned brown. The potatoes stand up like this beautiful and green plants brown and fell down and.
Okay, were you able to work in the fields after, your farm after the spraying incident?
Well, at that point, you know, we don't know what it is either, and you could just see the damage everywhere. And I got pretty sick that time with the glyphosate. A terrible thing. And so, you know, I could just see worse and worse and worse over 2 weeks. I mean, there was just a whole lot of nothing left.
Okay.
Half died and half was damaged.
Your Honor, again, I would move to strike as non-responsive narrative.
Sustained. It's all ordered that last response be stricken from the record and direct the jury to disregard that. And I'll just remind you to try to listen to the question. Again, they'll probably get there with other questions, but just try to answer it.
Just asking what you saw, not what you attributed to. So what did you see in terms of your crops? I think you've already answered the question just very briefly.
Just a lot of browning and it got worse and worse.
All right. So after the incident, did you feel comfortable farming on your property?
No, not at all. I mean, because it's like I spent months and months to get ready for this 5 months of picking and what I'm doing, and then all of a sudden, I mean, in seconds, it's just gone. Literally seconds.
Okay. And right after the incident, are you aware of the amount of damage, if any, to your property?
You know, immediately no. Immediately no.
Okay.
Within days, yes.
All right. So, Ms. Odum, so you received this report on August 3rd, 2021?
Yes.
Okay. Backing up, did you report this incident to your certifier as well?
Yes.
Okay. And you reported it to the Department of Agriculture, obviously?
Yes.
Did you call anybody else about it?
I'm sure.
Okay, do you remember?
Nobody, you know,
Okay.
no government agencies or anything like that.
All right. So what's going on with you, kind of, you know, emotionally, when something like this happens to you?
Objection relevance.
I'll let you respond. What's the relevance?
We've made particular damage claims associated with the assault, battery, nuisance, and trespass.
Overrule, I love
So go ahead.
Well, I'm pretty much just devastated because all my work has gone to nothing. And of course, then there's the fear of somebody just being able to come and, you know, spray you anytime they want to. Spray all your crops, spray your house, spray your animals, you know.
Okay. You have animals on your property?
I have dogs and I had chickens at the time. And I have cats.
Okay. So, what do you, so at that point, you're not picking and selling food, right?
Yes.
Okay. What are you doing for money?
Oh, you know, just using what I had and, you know, well, my son's on Social Security too, because he's got Down syndrome, so that is part of our income. And, you know, just barely making it.
Okay. So, did you try and rehabilitate things on your property after you got the results back from the Department of Agriculture on August 3rd?
Well, you know, I did, yeah, the stuff made me real sick and I didn't want to work in it and, of course, wasn't going to eat or sell it to the customers either. But, so then I did go back and was trying to, you know, because you got to clean stuff up. I mean, you got to, when you're farming, you know, you got to do the weeding. You got, because I don't spray, so I'm out there weeding by hand. I'm using a hoe. In between the rows, I'm doing the rototiller. And so this is a lot of upkeep. It's not something that just stays where it is, okay? You have to, and then like with my grains and stuff, well, you got to cut those constantly to keep them going. Also, once you let them go, well, they just go out of control and things. And so, yeah, I was going to go out and start working in the field again, which I did. I started, cleaning stuff up, and then that's when we got sprayed again.
Okay, are you talking about the August 16th incident?
Yes.
Can you describe for the jury, what was going on that morning on August 16th?
Well, at that point, I was just lucky to see the plane because actually I was in my house and I heard a plane. And then, so I walked out my back door, which my back door, you can see my whole property from that back door. But immediately when I walked out that door, coming from the south, over the top of my backyard at that point, the plane came and the mist just came down. It was like a mist. I can't say it was full-on spray, but it was a mist. And I could smell it. And then, of course, I've been sprayed a couple of times, so I'm susceptible to this stuff. My face turned red. I got the sore throat, and burning eyes and things.
Okay, so did you go complaints?
Yes.
Okay. Did
I actually was not going to because I'm just like, they don't do nothing. Nobody cares, But then my neighbor, had talked about things that happened to him, and so it prompted me to turn it in.
Your Honor, I move to strike as hearsay.
Sustained. No, I'll order that last response about what the neighbor said, be stricken.
Okay. So Ms. Odum, did you report the incident to your organic certifier again?
Yes,
Okay, what was their response?
just that they had to wait and see the reports.
Okay. And do you recall how long it was until you received the report?
I don't recall exactly.
So if you could take a look at what's been marked as Exhibit 59, is this the report?
Yes.
Do you see that date, September 20th, 2021 at the top?
Yes,
Do you think that's around when you received the report?
I assume.
And do you recall Mr. Lum visiting your property on that day?
I do.
Okay, what did he do?
We came in and I wanted to try to show him damage from the prior spraying, and he literally would not look at anything. He'd come in, he's taking one sample, where's it at? And I said, okay, well, it looks a little yellow here, take that, I don't know. And so, he one sample, he said nothing else.
Okay, so what were your impressions about whether Mr. Lum is taking your complaint seriously at this point?
Objection, lack of foundation, false speculation.
Oh, my assumption is he wanted to get in there and out of there. That's about it.
Okay, do you think that he was taking your complaint seriously?
Same objection.
I honestly don't know.
Okay. All right, so, so what's going on around your farm on August 16th and 17th? Or was there just one day or two?
There was 2 days.
Okay. So describe to the jury what happened the second day.
The second day, I saw that plane go over to the field that's a quarter-mile north of me. And I saw it spraying that field. And so I said, okay, I'm gonna walk over there because I could never get that spray on my camera. So I said, I'm gonna see, because you could see that spray coming out over the field, just going up over houses and around back, and you can see the spray coming out. And so I'm videoing it, but yet I can't get that spray on my camera. I got a cheap phone, I'm not rich. And so I, got to try to see, but then the weird thing was, okay, so I actually walked over to my neighbor's yard, which they got like 5 acres over there, and I just walked over there through their yard and I filmed. And then all of a sudden, I go back to I'm standing in my driveway, and I see that plane come around, and it went all the way around and made a beeline back over my house and sprayed me. And then he went back to the airport. Just literally didn't even have to go that way, but I'm videoing him the whole time, and he comes straight over my backyard again.
Did you call and complain about that incident?
That's when I complained.
Okay.
It was the second day. I
Okay.
complained about both incidents
Okay.
on the second.
So the report in Exhibit 59 contains your complaints for
both days. Is that
Yes.
correct? Okay. All right, so, so I just want to go through some paperwork about your business so you can
Okay.
explain what it shows. This has been admitted into the record. This is exhibit number 22. And Ms. Odum, can you explain what this shows?
This is just really a personal record. I mean, I do show these to the organic certifiers, although they do not require me to keep these records, and they're
Okay.
harvest and sales records.
Okay, so they show what?
They show what I've harvested, how much, when, who I sold it to, when I sold it, and where I picked it from.
So what time period is this log for?
I believe this log is for 2020.
Okay, and those dates, are they necessarily consecutive or?
Yeah, they're consecutive.
Okay, so if we look there, it starts at 6/4/20, is that correct?
Well, I believe the top one's 6/3, but
Okay.
I'm a little, I like to scroll.
Gotcha.
I don't like it.
So continuing on, it looks like June as well, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, June.
Yes.
So it looks like, I mean, is June when you start picking stuff on your farm?
June's pretty much, I think that year I was having some personal things going on, so I didn't really pick a lot before that. I mean, I could have, just depends on what I decide to do.
Okay,
And, yeah, so June's when the farmer's market starts. I try to target most things to, a lot of things, I can't say most, but a lot of things to start
looks like
there.
you're selling a varied crop there, looks like
Yeah.
potato, carrots, onions, et cetera.
Yes.
Okra? Okay, so next month, this is July, is that correct?
Yes.
July continued, July, August. Right? So August 29th there at the bottom. Okay. So do you see that column on the left there? When does that column end?
Well, by this here, okay, my last pick date was August 31st.
Okay.
Which I had picked the chart before, and then I just didn't even pick the rest of it. I just kind of spread out what I had, because with CSA, you can kind of do that a
So
little
the
bit.
left column, the dates there show when stuff was picked, and the right column is when it was sold.
Yes,
Okay. And the last date you picked was August 31st, 2021.
yeah.
Okay, why is that?
Well, because we got sprayed and I
Okay,
just couldn't do it.
all right. So let's take a look at Exhibit 23. These have been admitted into the record by stipulation of parties as well. What is this, what are these documents?
These are receipts that I make for the farmer's market, showing what I sold and, how much and everything.
Okay, and what year are these for?
Those are for 2020.
Okay. There's several pages here, I'll just thumb through them real quick. There's one on 7/11/22 there, do you see that?
Yes.
The one on the left is 7/4/20.
That's the one that my son with Down syndrome wrote on.
Okay. So, there's 31 pages of these, but can you describe for the jury just what they show?
They just show what I picked at the farmer's market, how much I sold, and here's what I've been selling to the Fallon Food Hub and stuff, so.
So you're actively in business doing farming, and these show that, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right, so, let's look at Exhibit 24, and these have also been admitted into the record via stipulation of the parties. What are these documents, Ms. Owen?
These are from the village farmer's market, the receipts,
Okay,
sales receipts.
so that's also in Fallon, is that right?
No, that's actually in Reno on California Booth Street.
Okay. And these records also show you were selling in June of 2021, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So, and again, there's 9 pages of these, but can you describe for the jury generally what they prove?
They just show that I was selling for, 5-6 weeks there, and then all of a sudden I got sprayed, and so we didn't sell anymore because of that.
Okay. All right. So, again, I asked you this question about 2020, but I didn't ask it about 2021. How much do you think you lost as a result of the spraying incidences that interrupted your ability to farm in 2021?
I would say I lost about $25,000.
Okay. So that year was basically kind of a ruined year for you?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
So, and I want to show the jury what's been marked as Exhibit 26. Can you describe what this is?
That is my input log.
Okay.
That just tells what inputs I have put into the soil,
Okay.
when and where.
So, and this is for 2021, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So, can you describe what this is for the jury and what you used it for?
Yeah, well, I just, well, with the organic certification, they want to know what you put in the soil and when, and it really has to do with the paper trail, mainly between, especially like with the manure, the time constraints of when you put it in compared to when you harvest it. And so you can see here that on 10/7/20, which was kind of beginning, I start sometimes December or earlier, would I have this place called Herb Hill, which I have a lot of herbs, and so I put in some farm compost there because I actually that year, over in that little section, I had planted like 50 crowns of asparagus, and then also planted some rhubarb, rhubarb over there. And so I put in the farm compost over there, and then also on my field, I call it field 1 and field 2, it's just my field split in half. And that's just basically how I mark it. So manure goes on field 2, 1-5, and manure on field 1 on 2-1.
Okay, so typically if you were doing, conventional agriculture, if you were using pesticides, is this where you would list the stuff you use on your farm?
Yes.
Okay. But you don't use any of that stuff, right? And if you did, it would be shown here.
Yes.
Do organic farmers sometimes use pesticides and herbicides?
I don't know what other organic farmers do. I assume they do, but honestly, when I'm farming, I am working a lot. And so I'm not really thinking about what everybody else is doing, okay? I don't know what they do. I just know what I do.
All right, so can you describe, for the incidents in 2021, the kind of impact it had on your life? On other things you wanted to do or your financial situation, et cetera. What was it like for you, for these things to happen?
Objection, relevant, certainly.
Well, I mean, I lost some money that year, but I can tell you that, I had actually applied for the High Tunnel grant.
What was that?
Well, it's a grant that you can get to build high tunnels that the NRCS funds. And so they'll give you like a $10,000 hoop house, and you end up paying like, $2,000 or $3,000 aside from that to get it in. But being I had lost that money and had continued on even into 2021, lost more money, I was not able to have the extra money to put those hoop houses in. And literally, I'm almost to the end of that rope right now, where the window that I can still do it. I only got like a month.
Do you want to continue farming?
Yes. I mean, it's really the only thing that's made me happy in my, aside from the kids and stuff, but, I love to work out in the garden, and I love to give people good food, and it's just what I love.
All right, so did you have any interactions with Mr. Frey after the August 31st, 2020 incident?
No,
Okay. Did he ever call you?
no.
Your Honor, there's an evidentiary issue I believe I need to bring to the court's attention outside the presence of the jury. If I'm
So, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we're going to take a brief recess. We'll make it as short a duration as possible to deal with these issues. During this recess, it is your duty not to converse among yourself or with anyone else on any subject connected with the trial. Do not communicate with anyone in any way regarding the case or its merits, either by phone, email, text, internet, or other means. Do not read, watch, or listen to any news or media accounts or commentary about the case. Do not do any research, such as consulting dictionaries, using the internet, or using reference materials. Do not make any investigation, test the theory of the case, recreate any aspect of the case, or in any other way investigate or learn about the case on your own. Additionally, it is your duty not to form or express an opinion on any subject connected with the case until it is finally submitted to you. We'll go ahead and excuse you to the jury room for a few minutes.